More now on our top story, the attack on the security headquarters in Damascus. Among those killed in the explosion were the defense minister, Dawood Raja, who was the most senior Christian in the government. There's also President Assad's brother-in-law, Asif Shaukat. He was deputy chief of the armed forces, and he, of course, played a crucial role in suppressing the opposition. Syria's deputy vice president, Hassan Turkmani, also died of his injuries that were, of course, sustained in that explosion. And there are reports in the Syrian state media that say that the interior minister, Mohammed Ashar, was also killed. Joining us now is Rami al Khouri, director of the Esam Fares Institute at the American University of Beirut. Rami al Khouri, just how vulnerable will the government be in Damascus tonight, seeing as it has that its carefully erected security wall around Damascus has so firmly been breached and some of its main pillars have so effectively been hit?
Well, the government is extremely vulnerable, and the whole edifice of rule by the Assad-led group that has run Syria for the last 42 years is extremely worried, I think, because they don't know who to trust. They don't know who among their inner circle or their guards or their associates or their drivers or their colleagues is actually working with the Free Syrian Army. The main problem now for the regime is that many people in the regime, ordinary soldiers, security people, officials, and many ordinary Syrians who are quietly, maybe tacitly with the regime, are going to be wondering if the regime can't protect its very top military people, the most important people fighting this war. If the regime can't protect them, then who in the world can it protect? Is this regime going to survive at all? And that's their main concern now. They're vulnerable, and they will have huge problems now dealing with this.
And if this was indeed an internal operation, as many people suspect, an operation that was either carried out or facilitated by people with the highest level of security clearance and intelligence knowledge, does it suggest that perhaps there may be very serious rifts between different factions that belong to the different security and military intelligence apparatus of the government?
Well, I think there's two possibilities. One is that you're already seeing a cleavage in the top, and some people are trying to eliminate other people to take over the government and bring this crisis to an end. That's one possibility. The other possibility is simply that there are more and more people who are turning to the opposition and working from inside to weaken the government and bring it down. Which one of those is the case, we don't know, but it'll become clear sometime soon.
And if the gun battles continue as we've seen in the last couple of hours, how difficult will it be for the government and its forces to gain the upper hand in what is fast becoming a classic urban guerrilla warfare within the streets of Damascus and its suburbs?
I think it's going to be impossible for the government to gain the upper hand. What we've seen in the last 16 months is steadily, continuously, unambiguously a process in which more and more Syrians are turning against the government, and the government uses more and more force to try to quell this protest, and it only backfires because more and more people stand up to the government. Even with 15 or 18,000 Syrians killed, people are not afraid to go out and challenge the government. And you'll probably see in Damascus, or Aleppo possibly, too, people now going out into the streets in bigger numbers, buoyed and fortified by this sign of vulnerability of the regime. The regime will strike back hard, there's no doubt about it, shelling and killing and using more and more violent weapons and methods. But they've done this for 16 months, and it has only made the regime weaker. And it's not just the internal weakness, it's the regional context and the international context. The regime is isolated, it's under pressure. Even its supporters, Iran and the Russians, can't seem to do very much, and themselves are losing credibility and are under pressure. So this is a regime in its last days or its last weeks or months.
Will much of all this, though, depend on just how cohesive the army can remain and whether or not there will be factions within the armed forces that will perhaps turn against the government and the president?
Well, you've got big defections going on, ordinary foot soldiers, middle-level officers, and a few higher-ranking officers have defected. Others will probably continue to defect. I don't think that the armed forces themselves will fall apart, and it's not in the interest of Syria or the opposition for them to fall apart. People want to avoid the problems that you had in Iraq after the transition there after the Anglo-American rather criminal invasion of Iraq, where the security mechanism of the whole country was wiped away. So people want to have an orderly transition, and it's important to have security, it's important to have a functioning military. Who runs it, who controls it, is the important question, which will be answered in due course.
Rami al Khouri, director of the Esam Fares Institute at the American University of Beirut, thank you very much.